This peculiar controller looks like an organic creature straight out of a 1980s sci-fi horror movie, but I promise it's 100% a leverless controller. Yes, it's designed for your Street Fighters, Guilty Gears, and more. But it's not built this way just for the giggles. It's been carefully designed with the goal to mitigate all kinds of pain and lifelong complications that fighting game fans might experience from using traditional sticks and leverless controllers. Let's take a closer look at the Vertibox V2 and find out how it's going to do this. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Massive thank you to everyone who subscribed recently. You've been making a big difference and I really appreciate that. There are still 93% of you out there who watch but haven't subscribed yet, so please don't be shy. If you're still on the fence about it, play a game with me. Pick a number between 1 and 16, and if the ruby bead on my spinner lands on your number, click the subscribe button for me. If the silver bead lands on your number, just hit the like button to help out with the algorithm. I might do this several times during the video, so feel free to stick or change your number. And if I don't catch you today, hopefully I'll get your number next time. Thanks also to Vertibox for sending this out to me. I do get to keep the controller, but they only asked for my honest opinion and feedback, which will be based on a prototype. I'm not sure what elements will carry over to the final product, but I will update the pinned comment below if there are any substantial changes. There's no confirmed price yet, and Vertibox is still working on their official website where it will be available when it's launched. But I will leave a link to their Twitter account below so you can follow their progress. So before I show you how to use this controller, it's important to know why to use this controller. The big bad wolf for all gamers is repetitive strain injury. Repeated intense movements of our hands can cause pain, stiffness, tingling and other nasty stuff. The most obvious one is wrist pain. And if we still want to be throwing Hadoukens and Psych Bukaks in 40 years, we're going to have to preserve our bits and pieces. Some gamers, myself included, have moved from stick to leverless controllers to avoid these kinds of pains. But for some players, even this change isn't enough. This brings us back to the Vertibox. The idea here is to keep things as natural and ergonomic as possible. Instead of rotating the wrists and having my palms face down, my hands loosely slide across the body where my fingers hang over all of the controls. It reminds me of holding a chalice, or maybe that clay pottery class I went to one time. For reference, my hand is 7.5 inches by 3.5 inches. And the reference is important because it's going to be hard for the Vertibox to suit every hand size. The Vertibox V2 casing is made with 3D printed resin. 3D printing is usually quite rough, but Vertibox has sanded this down to smooth it out, so I don't feel any nicks or bumps on the surface. I'm not sure if the final product will be 3D printed or injection molded. I am hoping the version 3 will be a high quality build, but it goes without saying, the price for something so uniquely shaped will cost a lot of money. CAN bar buttons are installed all over, except on the 2 jump buttons, which are by Punk Workshop. I wasn't able to separate these pins because when I changed the left one to L1, the right one changed to L1 too. Unfortunately, I don't think this is tournament legal, but it sounds like Vertibox are going to do something about this in the upcoming version 3. They did mention something about binding one of them to D-pad up and the other to analog up. Another option is to rewire the PCB, but I'm too scared of breaking stuff, so I won't be doing that for this video. On the left hand, we have the directional inputs, left, down and right. On the right hand is square, X, triangle, circle, R1, R2, L1 and L2. So it's essentially a split layout in a vertical body. We have everything else we need on the top of the controller here. It should be options, share, home, turbo and touchpad. But because I updated the firmware to the latest 7.10 build, I swapped the share and touchpad button because I like to have touchpad up here. The L3 and R3 button are new to the V2. The cable is connected to the PCB, which is not held down inside. That's why the socket isn't on the surface of the body. This is inconvenient if you like to remove your cable, but it does mean there is less chance of the socket breaking. If the cable fails, you can just get a new one, unscrew the body and connect it to the PCB. It doesn't have an EXT port for PS5 and Xbox players who want to plug their authentication dongles directly into the controller. Under the hood, the Vertibox V2 runs on a GP2040. That means it's very easily customizable if you have a computer or Mac to plug it into. It uses the Pico Fighting board build and I have successfully updated it to the latest version, which is super easy to do. It's just a drag and drop process. It's compatible with Switch, PC, Mac, and as I mentioned before, PS5 and Series X gamers will need a dongle like the Brook FGC and XB3 to plug this into the console directly. One strange quirk I noticed is that the pin viewer does not detect the left pin or the 2 jump pins, but they do work fine and can be remapped. The Vertibox V2 sounds hollow and pingy in its basic state. Luckily, it was delivered in a box full of this popcorn foam, so I'm going to take a leaf out of the mechanical keyboard playbook and stuff as much of it as I can into the controller as possible. This does add a bit of dampening to the sound, but unfortunately, the pinginess remains. The jump buttons by Punk Workshop are standard Cherry MX switches, but I've never really been a fan of the included reds, so I'm going to swap them out for my Gateron blacks, which are lubed and filmed. My jump buttons are now a bit creamier and fockier than before. The CAN bar buttons look like standard arcade switches to me, and I'm a bit scared of messing around with those, so I will leave them as they are. In terms of art, it's going to be difficult to make this your own. If you're good at drawing, maybe you can grab some Posca pens and do something crazy. Stickers are also a good idea. I'm not sure if the final version will have cushions built into these pads, but for now Vertibox sent me these to tide me over. I don't feel like I need them though, because the plastic is comfy enough for my hands. These cushions are better for lap play because the controller won't sit flush on a desk with them on. Finally, if you're well versed with Pico boards and maybe even the Brook Fusion stuff, you could in theory replace the PCB with one you source yourself if you're willing to rewire it all. This could open up some cool options like an internal EXT port, so you can use a low footprint PS5 authenticator like the Booter 5 instead of an external Brook Wingman.
Can I just give me 2 seconds? Oi! Yes, how many? I don't know, but I want to run with this motherfucker. Kind of awkward to DI.
How's it feel so far?
The button placements are quite awkward compared to what I'm used to, but it can work over time, I think.
You got to adjust how you throw, right?
Nah.
You have to use
DI is a bit weird as well. Oh, you know what? The only thing I can't do, mate, is throw. A little bit weird, I'm not gonna lie. My brain has to adapt because you know it's like it feels like it's upside down.
I took this controller to a meetup and asked a few of my friends who have also made the jump to leverless to give this a try. Bear in mind that they jumped straight into sets and had no time to get used to the controller, but the general consensus seemed to be that initially they had to rewire their brain for the throw command on Street Fighter 6. In SF6 we have to press 2 light attack buttons at the same time to throw, but the shape of the Vertibox means that getting your thumb over to hit the X button is quite difficult. If your playstyle requires medium punch and medium kick to be pressed simultaneously as well, this is another hurdle that has to be crossed. I fully agree with that sentiment, even though I've had a lot more time with the controller myself, but I have come up with ways to get around this. Mechanically, I combined the L3 and R3 buttons here to throw and drive parry, or change my fingering technique, since the buttons are angled in a way that allows a column of inputs to be pressed by one digit. This isn't ideal, but it does work. As with any controller and any keybind, this will take the brain some time to rewire and execute confidently. The question is, are you willing to take the time to relearn all of this? If your experience with a leverless is on the Vertibox, then you might have an advantage because you won't need to rewire your brain from other layouts. You just learned this new playstyle from the ground up. When it comes to hand health, well, I've had some long sessions on this and the only discomfort I've felt so far is from the top of my hand. But I'm guessing this was general fatigue rather than any kind of dangerous, irreversible pain. So I think the concept does work. One important thing you have to consider with this controller is that storing it correctly might be troublesome because of the shape and the non-detachable cable. It doesn't play well with my neat storage solution, for example, but if you're looking for a controller like the Vertibox, I'm guessing you won't be keen on having a collection of flatbox style controllers anyway. For this comparison, I have two ergonomically focused controllers in the flatbox style that both use the GP2040 software. This is the Tiki Taka S15. We have a split layout here, no art modding, no screen and no onboard EXT port, just like the Vertibox, so console players must use a Brook converter. It's quite fun to play on, the buttons are very light and springy, but it has no frills. This one is the dual pad Zen. The shape and layout of nearly every element is focused on natural angles and comfort. It uses pretty much all the bells and whistles compatible with GP2040 controllers, like the screen, EXT port, and RGB features. It's very light, and although it's physically quite small, it's still wide enough for lap play. This version of the Zen is also art moddable. I have full reviews for both of these controllers, so check them out in the playlist I link at the end of this video. You have to commend Vertibox for even attempting something like this. They're creating a niche product in an already niche category, but I think that they have sacrificed some important things in the name of achieving these ergonomics. For most people, maybe a 30-degree orientation is a good middle ground to achieve long-term hand comfort and execution. But if you really want to play in this handshake position, it will take work to learn. I'm sure you would already know if that is a worthwhile endeavor for you. I do have to stress that this is a prototype. The eventual release for V3 could be completely different. Having said that, these are the things I would like to see in the end product. Number one is an improvement in material quality. If the Vertibox ends up being more than £100 or dollars, I would like to see a full, high quality injection molded body. I know there are people out there who love their 3D printed stuff, but I'm not convinced yet. The aesthetics and finish aren't quite up to scratch for a product like this. Number two, I would like Vertibox to put some thought into an EXT port. If they made the base into some sort of twist and release flap, it could allow gamers to access an internal EXT port perhaps, and maybe even allow us to disconnect the USB cable at the same time. Number three, I hope that the full release will put some focus into the timbre of this controller. Maybe they can include removable foam for people who want a deeper, less hollow sound. Number four, either aim for hot swappable arcade buttons or put in the absolute best arcade buttons possible so that players might not feel the need to replace them. Finally, I'm a sucker for the GP2040 OLED screens, and I think there's plenty of space on this chassis to include one. With those changes, I believe Vertibox would be able to find a very particular category of customer who'd be willing to shell out whatever they decide to charge for this controller. So if I had to sum up this whole video, yes, the concept works, it's comfortable, but prepare for a steep learning curve. The build quality and engineering isn't great right now, but if they improve on this with the full release, this could be a very attractive proposition for those who want to prevent long-term hand issues. Thanks for joining me for today's video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you want to know anything else about the Vertibox, just leave a comment and I will help if I have the answers. You can also check out the link to their Twitter account below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you joined in on my game earlier, and if you want to binge some of my leverless controller reviews, click on this playlist.